Yeah.
So, comments, questions generally about centering prayer or um, of things we discussed today.
Rob, if I can ask, obviously I'm new to this, so forgive me if this question is very basic. But I just wondered whether, with the distracting thoughts that come, whether the object is the more you get into the practice, do the thoughts become less and less? And is there like a goal to reach where you can do a full 20 minutes with no thoughts?
I'll give you the 2 year in perspective. Maybe Doug's willing to comment, but certainly for me, the thoughts have not gotten less and less. They've maintained a high level of distraction. Maggie, what I found happens is that in the first couple of weeks, maybe month or two, the distracting thoughts are harmless, silly thoughts like what's for dinner? Um, you know, I wonder what the weather's going to be like. But what happens pretty soon is that the distracting thoughts become things that are linked to your deep issues and the false self within you. So let's say that you've got an unhealthy need for affirmation. The thoughts that come to distract have everything to do about conversations you've had where that need for affirmation was violated, or someone you're trying to impress, and when that happens, you begin to realize how powerful this is. That this is a process, number one, of you becoming aware of those things that drive you, but more importantly, that the silence and the repeated letting go of those thoughts is a form of dying to self, dying to that false self, because, when Christ said we should die to ourselves, he wasn't talking about dying to the inherent God created part of us. He was talking about dying to the false self, to that unhealthy need for affirmation. And so you're letting go of that thought and you're saying, no, I don't want this, I want God. And you're loosening the grip of that thing on you. And that's part of a process of divine therapy. So now, I don't know what it looks like 5 or 10 years or 20 years in, because I haven't been there. um,
It's still the same. It's still the same.
Okay.
I think, to me, I'm Catholic, and I say that only because we have people within our faith, and whether you're Catholic probably or any other religion though, who exemplify that perseverance, that continuation, that continually opening up and looking toward God. I think of like Mother Teresa and those years of darkness that she describes. And yet, even though she felt she was in a desert, she still, it's the intent, I think, that prayer, that word that we have expresses an intent. And when we become distracted, when I become distracted, and you realize it sneaks up on you. All of a sudden, you realize I'm thinking about something, and so your prayer word, sometimes even your breathing, expresses that intent again to turn to God and to open up to God. But the other thing that happens, though, I think too, is that with time, the silence becomes comfortable, becomes something that you almost sink into. There's a feeling of returning to that silence takes on. And I think that takes a while too to develop that feeling of ease with silence.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So, Maggie, one more thought on this. We spoke about, I think, in our second session on the introduction, that if you just take a step back and you study meditation, you go and do a Wikipedia search on it, you'll learn that there's kind of broadly 4 types of meditation. The y-axis is faith-based methods, and then non-faith-based methods. So, there's a lot of meditation out there that's got no faith behind it. It's purely a scientific thing, and people think of it as a benefit for their brains. And then on the x-axis, there are 2 types. There's concentrative meditation, and there's non-directive meditation. Concentrative meditation means using the mind to stop the mind. So an example of that would be a mantra, a word that you're constantly repeating in order to not think. It might be staring at something to not think. I've had no experience with that method, so but I do want to stress that's not what we're doing. We're not trying to use the mind to stop the mind. In fact, we're not trying to stop the mind. You're not trying to not think. The non-directive method, so at least centering prayer, is a non-directive Christian faith-based method, and that method is moving to the heart, to the spirit, as the Bible calls it. And the mind continues because it's a perpetual motion machine, and it's thinking thoughts. But you get to a point where you're kind of in the heart and you're watching those thoughts and you're not engaged with them. That's the key, is not to get carried away and be engaged with a thought. And I can't speak to the benefits of the other methods, the concentrative and the non-faith-based methods. Presumably there's some neurological benefits and perhaps other benefits. And I'm not criticizing them, but the power of this method, the power of the non-directive method, is exactly that the thoughts do come and that you release them. You let go of them. You surrender them. And there's a powerful dying to self process. You're exercising a spiritual muscle by choosing God rather than the thought, to engage in that thought. And that's causing a huge transformation. So again, whether or not that happens in a concentrative method, I don't know. But understanding that distinction is one reason why, even someone like Doug, who has done this for a very long time, you're not reaching a point of not thinking. You're reaching a point of being more and more comfortable in the silence, in the place in your spirit, in your heart, the place of being connected to God's presence.
Okay. Can I ask one more question?
We charge per question, Maggie, so no, of course.
Can I also assume that during the 20 minutes, you're not looking for any sort of manifestation, any spiritual experience, other than just making yourself available in silence to God working within you, that you then, because I listening to your story and how you've changed, but I'm guessing that becomes like a revelation. So, oh my goodness, I've changed in that way, rather than it being in the moment as you're meditating.
That's a very good question, and it probably warrants a very long discussion, which we won't do right now.
Okay.
But just, I think, a quick response from me, and I'd love to hear if Doug's got any thoughts on this. But my quick response is this, that you should be willing to let go of all thoughts. And those thoughts include kind of those manifestations you're talking about. Because you're seeking the giver, not the gift. Now, Thomas Keating says that, if you're having this wonderful experience that you're feeling so wonderfully of the Holy Spirit, you probably need it and enjoy it, go for it. But in the longer run, you're pressing beyond an experience and you're pressing into the heart of God. So ultimately, you do want to let those go. So that's the one reason you let that go. But the other reason you let it go is because things that involve the mind can also be manipulated by the mind. And this is a long topic, but your false self is so wound up with mental programs that you've developed since you were a small kid. So let's say you've got an unhealthy need for affirmation. You walked into a classroom one day, the boys laughed at you, you developed a mental response. That response has now suppressed all of the pain subconsciously, and you've got this mental program for how you deal with things that violate your need for affirmation. And the thing is that those same mental programs kick in during centering prayer, even when we're having experiences with God. And so you could be led that way. And that's another reason this is not a mind-first method. This is not relying on my mind to get me. That's why the whole point of what I shared today is so important. You don't have to do anything because grace did it all. Your mind doesn't have to lead. And in fact, your mind shouldn't lead because your mind is unrenewed and influenced by these false programs. So those are the two reasons why we let go of all thoughts and experiences, even if they're wonderful. The one is because we're pressing deeper into the essence and the heart of God. We're seeking the giver, not the gift. There's always more in Him than the experience. And the second is because if it involves your mind, there's a good chance it involves your false self. And there's another time for that. Just to be clear, we're not suggesting you live like this 24 hours a day. We're just suggesting that you do this for 20 minutes a day. Or 2 times 20 or 2 times 30 or whatever it is.
Thank you.
Doug, anything to add on that? Or Don?
I think you said it well.
Okay. We could take maybe 2 or 3 more minutes. Just we used about 5 minutes to introduce. Anybody else got comments or thoughts?
I have a question.
Yes, Gail.
I just want to clarify something. I understand that the false self speaks to us through our mind. So therefore, if you're praying about something that you want God to do for you or change in you, where do you draw the line from seeking outside help? Because to me, outside help is a mind to a mind, even if it's a Christian. And I'm saying that because I'm trying to understand this. Is centering prayer, I believe centering prayer is your heart, like you said, connecting to God's heart. And are you saying the healing or whatever it is, the change will come that way?
I
Does
think,
that make
yeah, your question makes a ton of sense. And again, there's a lot that can be said. Here's my first reaction. One of the important things about centering prayer is, certainly early on, is to realize it's so radically different from what Christians are used to doing. I don't know so much about Catholic Christians, where contemplation was a bigger part of the Catholic tradition, but certainly evangelicals and even charismatic evangelicals, which is my background, this is so radically different that because we never quiet. This is so radically different that and it's so powerful that we begin to think this is everything. Or sometimes people who are still concerned and skeptical wonder if we're saying this is everything. This is the only way you should pray. This is the only way you should get spiritual healing. You don't need the Bible because God will talk to you directly in your heart. We're not saying any of those things. I think this can become huge in your life, and we'll hear from others who've done it for a long time. But go and get outside counseling. You desperately still need your Bible. There are other ways of praying, you know. So no, this isn't. I found this is hugely effective in transforming your inner world. But personally, God has done some amazing healing work of my inner world through the scriptures, through listening to other people speak, through counseling, you know, through a variety of means. What I have found is that the more stubborn stuff, the deeper stuff, that other thing, those other methods weren't getting to, are starting to come loose from this. But that's just, you know, that's just my experience. Is that helpful?
Yes, I guess I was trying to figure out, like, the false self also will condemn you in areas, like an example would be, oh, you prayed about this for so long, God doesn't listen to you. I think that's the false self because your heart knows different. So that's why I was saying,
yes,
connecting with God heart to heart.
No, you're absolutely right. That's just, okay. That's the false self, that's the ego. Guilt is a function of the false self. And the great thing about that is, rather than arguing with it, which is what we used to do, is we just let that thought go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good.
Wonderful. Well, I want to respect our time. It's 5 minutes after.